This question right here, it's a reality that costs companies, well, billions every single year. You've got brilliant people, you're spending a ton on technology, and somehow you still end up with this messy, expensive hairball of systems that just don't talk to each other. But what if the problem isn't really the technology? What if it's the role we've been forcing IT to play all along?
And that leads us straight to this, a fundamental identity crisis. See, we've basically cast our central IT organization as the fire department. Their job is to react, to respond to outages, to keep the servers from, melting down. But at the same time, we also expect them to be the city planners, designing the blueprints for all our future growth. But think about it. When you're constantly putting out fires, you never have the time to look at the big picture. And that's the trap. They get stuck in this totally reactive cycle, which makes it pretty much impossible to have a real strategic impact on the business.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because you're faced with a pretty stark choice. Over on the left, you've got the IT group as a bureaucratic firefighter, let's be honest. The team everyone tries to work around. But on the right, you have something totally different. A lean, strategic governor that actually enables the business to move faster and with way more confidence. So the crucial question is this: how in the world do you make that leap from the left to the right? Well, it all starts with a new mental model. We have to separate the strategic act of governing, which is really about setting the rules of the game, from the operational act of doing, which is, playing the game. This single idea is the absolute core of effective IT governance.
Okay, so let's get into the framework that makes this separation possible. And listen, this is not about creating more bureaucracy. It's about building 4 distinct strategic capabilities. A good way to think about them is as 4 new roles for your central IT group: the strategist, the architect, the rule setter, and the connector.
So, here they are, our 4 core governance functions. And notice, they are deliberately non-operational. Their job isn't to run the servers, it's to steer the entire ship. Let's start right at the top with IT strategy. The strategy function is your #1 bridge to the business. It stops the organization from asking, what's the newest, shiniest technology, and instead forces it to ask, how can we use technology to, say, increase our market share by 5% this year? It makes sure that every single dollar spent on IT is explicitly tied to a real business outcome.
Second, we've got architecture. Let's go back to our city planner analogy for a second. The architecture function isn't out there laying every brick or paving every road. Nope. Instead, it designs the city grid, the power system, and the building codes. It creates that master blueprint that ensures a new department built on one side of the company can actually connect to the data and systems on the other.
Third, we have IT policy and standards. The best way to think of these is as the traffic laws for your company's digital highways. They're what set the speed limits for data security and put up stop signs for major compliance risks. I mean, without these clear rules of the road, you just get chaos, collisions, and really costly cleanups.
And finally, coordination. This function is the company's central nervous system for technology knowledge. It's that connective tissue making sure best practices are shared across every team. In short, it stops 5 different departments from trying to solve the exact same problem in 5 different and very expensive ways.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the payoff. This quote, it comes from a huge multinational conglomerate that was basically drowning in its own complexity. By putting this model into practice, they achieved what a lot of people think is impossible: enterprise-wide alignment and local agility. So how can you get these same results? Well, that's what we're going to cover in our leadership playbook. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually make it work in the real world, without creating some new ivory tower of architects who just slow everything down? And that is a totally fair question. That's exactly where our leadership playbook comes in. So here are the first most critical moves. You have to formally charter these functions so they have legitimacy. You've got to appoint a chief architect who has genuine authority, real teeth, not just influence. And maybe most critically, you have to empower that person and their team to actually say no when a project threatens the long-term health of the entire enterprise. This move fundamentally redefines the CIO's job from managing operations to governing strategy. But out of all the ways you could measure if this is working, there is one metric, one that tells you more than almost any other, and it's a metric that most companies don't even track.
Imagine for a second if your architecture exception rate was 25%. Now, what does that actually mean? It means 1 out of every 4 tech projects in your company is getting a special pass to break the rules and deviate from your standard enterprise blueprint. Think about it this way. What if 25% of the buildings in your city were built without following the building code? That's the kind of hidden risk you could be carrying.
So I want you to just pause for a second and really think about this. What's your exception rate? Do you even know? See, a high rate isn't just about people breaking rules. It is an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool. It forces a really important conversation. But you have to be careful. It could mean your architecture is way too rigid or just plain outdated. I once saw an architecture team mandated technology that was 2 years behind what the market actually needed. Of course, the business units had to request exceptions just to stay competitive. That exception rate, it becomes your most honest feedback loop, telling you exactly where the friction is. And that brings us to the most practical part of our explainer.
So what's the one thing you can do like next week to cut through all the theory and start making a real difference? Well, it's actually simpler and way more powerful than you might think.
That's it. Just go in your next leadership meeting and ask that simple 2-part question. The answers you get, or maybe the silence that follows, that will tell you everything you need to know about where you are on this journey. Because at the end of the day, strategic governance isn't about controlling IT. It's about empowering your entire business to win.